All right, what's up, everyone? Bryce Gelman here. I'm a man of my word. What can I say? I'm a man of my word. I said I'd give you more Mets content, more Jets content, not just going to be talking about the teams that I'm a fan of. I'm a New York sports guy. And there's a lot of stuff surrounding the Mets, and there's also a lot of stuff surrounding the Jets. So, again, I'll be getting into those two teams. You will not find any Nets talk from me. I don't care about them. No one cares about them. I will never talk Mets or Nets, but I will talk Mets, and I will talk Jets. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him on again. He's one of my good friends. He's also a writer for Metsmerized, a popular Mets blog, one of the smartest people I know, someone who knows a lot about the Mets and baseball in general, my good friend, Gabe Hirsch. What's up, Gabe?
How's it going, Bryce? Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, of course. It's always a pleasure to have you on. As I don't like to toot people's horn too much, but you are one of the smartest people that I know when it comes to baseball and other things as well. But let's get into it, because this is a very interesting time for the Mets. First place in the NL East. They flipped the season around. There was a rough stretch in which at some point they were 3-13 in their last 16 games. Rough June, rough start to July. I mean, same thing with the Yankees. But it seems like the Mets have turned a corner here. The deadline is tomorrow at 6 p.m. There have been rumors swirling around about Luis Robert. I don't know what's going on with that. I want to get into that with you and a bunch of other different things, but I feel like we should start off with what happened last night. I was watching Juan Soto gets hurt, a little foot injury, tweaks his foot, ends up finishing the at-bat, but gets pulled from that game. What were your thoughts on that? Is there any cause for concern going forward?
Yeah, obviously you hold your breath when something like that happens. Soto was in visible pain. It was impressive that he ended up finishing up the at-bat, and it resulted in like a 96 mile per hour ground out. That beautiful play by Cronenworth at second base. But yeah, obviously there's concern when that happens, fearing the worst, broken bone, but it came out pretty quickly that they were thinking foot contusion, and then x-rays confirmed overnight that there is in fact no break. He's out of the lineup today, an off day tomorrow, so the hope is that he'll be back in there on Friday. So yeah, overall, my concern right now is pretty minimal. Obviously, the Mets have seen Lindor broke his toe back in Los Angeles in the beginning of June, and has struggled to match what his output since then. So those are the little things that you kind of think of that you hope, and obviously a broken foot would probably sideline him for a solid several weeks to a month at least. But right now, just thankful, looking like it's a day-to-day thing.
Yeah, I feel like the Mets caught a break there. I think there was a lot of concern after he was down, but then he finished the at-bat, and you're like, all right, well, he wouldn't finish the at-bat if the training staff really thought that there was concern for going forward. So good sign for the Mets, not losing Soto potentially long-term. He's one of those types of guys that doesn't get flustered when it comes to those types of things. At first, obviously, there's a lot of pressure riding on him after signing the most, the richest contract in sports history, and of course, being in a new environment with the Mets and yada yada yada. He's really turned a page on that, and also just the BS spewing from talking heads of the media, saying, "Oh, does he hate being a Met? Does it?" BS. I mean, I always called BS on that. It was kind of just all right, what's going to get us the most clicks? That was the news story at the moment. But of course, now Soto has turned a page and is, I saw the All-Star or MVP power rankings number 3 or 4. So clearly he's in a solid spot right now. All right, so got the deadline at 6:00 tomorrow. Mets in desperate need of relief pitching. Bullpen has sucked. I mean, I feel like this is kind of like an ongoing trend for the Mets year in and year out. That's kind of been their Achilles heel over the last, even you could even say 5-6 years, ever since they really became competitive in the Steve Cohen era. But they're interested in relievers. You also hear again Robert. Is it Robert or Robert? I always.
People are split. I think it's Robert. People say Robert. He's Cuban. I would have to think it's not Robert, but
whatever. Who cares? He's Robert here. So you got some rumors here with Luis Robert, center fielder for the White Sox. I mean, listen, he's got a 643 OPS. Is this really the guy that the Mets are going to go out and acquire here ahead of the deadline?
Yeah, I think like you said, first of all, touch back on the bullpen. The Mets' current state of the bullpen, at least the way I view it, is I think there's a strong argument to be made that Edwin Diaz is the best relief pitcher in baseball. That's how he's performed this year since the incident where in I think it was early May or maybe late April when the trainer identified his legs were two different lengths. Ever since they sorted that out, he's given up like 2 earned runs and has been absolutely nails. My level of trust with Diaz, whether or not he'll walk a few guys and make things interesting or not, my level of trust with him is extremely high. I think he can strike out any single player in the league. I think he is the most reliable, one of the most reliable options you could have. But beside him, right, the bullpen has kind of been a revolving door. I mean, we had Huascar Brazoban was one of our top high leverage relief pitchers earlier in the year. He was even our secondary closing option, and they actually just sent him down to AAA Syracuse yesterday. So, a lot can change. Bullpen folks are highly volatile. Reed Garrett has been pretty solid the entire year. Ryan Stanek is a guy who has shown flashes of being a really nice high leverage option. He was great in the playoffs last year, but he has also had some moments this year where he's blown up. But Stanek, especially for the playoffs, a guy who can touch 101 miles per hour. Those are the sort of guys you like in your bullpen. Brooks Raley is now back from Tommy John surgery, and I like the addition of Gregory Soto to kind of pair with him as a second left-handed option. But yeah, I mean, thinking about this bullpen, it's obvious that there is a need for, at a bare minimum, one more relief pitcher. That's assuming they'll keep Rico Garcia on the roster, who's looked good in flashes, as their 8th reliever. But in all likelihood, I think the addition of 2 relievers would be most beneficial. And with one of those relief pitchers being someone that is of the caliber, not exactly the caliber of Diaz, but someone who can come close to the caliber of Diaz, right? It's the Mets are right now, in my opinion, lacking sort of that second option that this guy checks in the game and you can feel comfortable about him shutting the door down. And it's important for the Mets to acquire that sort of pitcher for a number of reasons. Number one being last year, as we saw with the Dodgers, the bullpen and the struggles with the bullpen and kind of how they were overworked and overmatched by the Dodgers lineup was a key point. But number two is that Diaz is having a fantastic season. He has a player option that it seems in all likelihood he will decline in hopes for a higher AAV contract in the offseason. And I think that David Stearns, as good as Diaz has been, probably has his apprehensions about giving him another sizable contract, just given the natural volatility of relief pitchers. So, if they went out there and they acquired a guy like Johan Duran or Griffin Jacks from Minnesota, these are guys, or Camilo Doval has been a name that's floating around from the Giants. These are guys that have prior closing experience or are currently closing. They have elite stuff. They've had elite seasons, and you can kind of feel confident with them not only being a key setup man this year, but also a possible closing option if Diaz were to leave in the offseason.
Yeah, and now I don't mean to cut you off. I just don't think there's any chance that David Stearns allows Edwin Diaz to walk. I feel like the fan base would start a riot. I also said last year, and I was correct on this, that Pete Alonso would stay a Met. I didn't expect no other teams to balk at the idea that he's going to make a lot of money, and Boris wanted 5-6 years, and of course he didn't get that, and he comes back to the Mets on a prove-it contract. I never thought he'd leave the Mets, especially after that postseason run. I think it's much of the same here with Diaz. He might want $20 million a year, maybe even more. I think at the end of the day, Stearns is going to pay it. You can't let him go. You can't.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And you're right. And Diaz seems, at least from the surface, that he absolutely loves being a Met. And he's had some very stellar seasons here, especially after a rocky first year here. He's really solidified himself as one of the best closers in Mets recent franchise history, Mets franchise history as a whole. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. But either way, I mean, Diaz, irrespective of Diaz, I do think it behooves the Mets to kind of acquire someone, of that, close to that caliber to kind of pair with him. And then obviously in the event that he happens to leave, you have some coverage there. But switching gears to Luis Robert, I think that it's the sort of player David Stearns has in the past gravitated towards, someone who has all the tools, immense talent, has had really good seasons in the past, but is currently struggling kind of at a valley in terms of his value, right? The reports are saying that the White Sox aren't too inclined to give him up if they're not getting a team's top 10 prospect in return. But the White Sox don't have a ton of bargaining power here, in my opinion, and they're threatening to, pick up his $20 million club option, which at this point is a massive overpay for someone who's put up, 600 OPS seasons the last couple of years. But yeah, one thing that has been consistent with Robert that the Mets, that the Mets significantly need is his ability to hit against left-handed pitching. Despite the terrible numbers this year overall, he's still, I believe, 9th in the league in terms of WRC plus or OPS plus against left-handed pitching. He's a career high 800s, lower 900s hitter against left-handed pitching. And, that's something that the Mets really need. He's still got 25 steals already on the year, and he does connect for home runs. So, right, I think you kind of have to look at it in the lens of what have the Mets gotten from the center field position this year, which has been Tyrone Taylor, who offers a very good glove, but has been non-existent with the bat. And then Jeff McNeil, who's been very solid with the bat and very serviceable in center field, but there's ways to optimize the lineup. McNeil can play second base. McNeil can play corner outfield if needed. McNeil could DH. So I think that upgrading in center field is definitely a logical option. And if it's not Lou Bob, it could be someone like Harrison Bader coming back. He's having a solid year with the Twins. But I definitely do think that iterating on center field is something that's important for the Mets.
Yeah, I feel like McNeil has played a lot of center field over the last month or so. And you kind of see it around the league. Like in big spots, especially in the playoffs, teams will refrain from playing a guy like that to optimize the lineup. Because in a big moment, if he, botches a throw or has a slow reaction time to a ball hit over his head, that could potentially lose you a game and lose you a series. So I do think that the Mets need to have an upgrade there. Tyrone Taylor, he can't justify playing. He's a .9 WAR, which you look at his offensive stats, you think, how is that possible? But as you mentioned, he's an extremely plus fielder. So you look at both sides of the coin there. In one hand, you got McNeil, who's over 800 OPS, having a resurgent year, and then on the other hand, you got Tyrone Taylor with under 550 OPS. So it's give or take. I think you could platoon both those guys, but at the end of the day, you don't trust Tyrone Taylor whatsoever at the plate. Luis Robert, listen, he's at the start of this month at a 185 batting average, and now he's up to 206. And his OPS from 583 to 643. So, hey, listen, I think maybe the White Sox might look at that and be like, oh, look at him. He's on the upswing. Look at this uptrend. So maybe the Mets look at it as too steep of a price. Another guy that you talked about with me, I reached out to you, was like, hey, what's going on here? Something that, from an outsider's perspective, obviously I follow the Mets. I don't watch clearly as much of the Mets as you do or any of my Mets fan friends, but something from afar that I've seen is Mark Vientos, who has had 2 solid games in a row. I will mention that. But before that, he has obviously had an extremely underwhelming season. So you did mention this. You thought that Vientos might get traded by Thursday, tomorrow at 6:00. Has that sentiment changed for you?
I still perceive Vientos, especially when looking at the group of 4 young infielders that the Mets have currently on their roster, as the most likely to get moved. I'm not saying that. I don't have any sort of intel into any of the rumor mill, but just purely from a roster construction standpoint, Mark Vientos is the most logical candidate to be shipped off somewhere else. We're talking about a guy who defensively graded out as, when he was primarily playing third base, graded out as like the worst defensive third baseman in the league. They tried him. He played 1 game at first base when Pete Alonso was sitting out after, Pete Alonso didn't start the game. Vientos played first base, immediately was tested with a couple of throws, did not look particularly comfortable over there. So yeah, it's difficult when a guy's, all of his value is tied into his offensive output and he's struggling at the plate. And it's really tough to gauge what sort of player Mark Vientos is currently and what sort of player Mark Vientos can be in the future, because last year he was a defining piece of what led the Mets to the playoffs. And then
Yep.
in the postseason, he was the Mets' best hitter.
Unreal.
He, 27 home runs. You cannot fake that power. Mark Vientos legitimately has 30 to 40 home run power in Major League Baseball across a full season. But there are flaws. He doesn't get on base a lot. He whiffs a lot. He's very slow. And once again, he cannot play the field. And I think, looking at him, he's got 4.5 more years of control, but he doesn't have any minor league options left. You've got Beatty, who has at least proven himself this year to be a league average hitter and a average to above average defender at third base and second base. You've got Ronnie Mauricio, who has come on extremely strong recently, headlined by a 4-for-4 performance on Sunday Night Baseball, hitting one into McCovey Cove off of Randy Rodriguez, who's been one of the best relief pitchers in all of baseball this year. Mauricio, actually, I just saw a graphic earlier today that he's second in Major League Baseball in outs above average at third base, which just is incredible to think of considering he's only played a handful of games there.
Not very sustainable, I feel like he'll regress to the mean there, but
exactly
for now.
Yeah, if it regresses, it regresses, but he's at least proof capable once again of playing average to above average defense at third, at second. He played a game of shortstop when Lindor was hurt. And then you've got Acuna, who kind of offers a bit of a different skill set. He hasn't shown much ability to hit, but he's got elite speed. The Mets don't have a ton of real burners on the team. Acuna is that guy. He played an inning of center field yesterday. I could see Acuna getting moved. I really, the one that I don't think has any chance of getting moved is Mauricio. I just think that his kind of basket of raw tools and his frame and the power that he's displayed, I think that he can develop into a very, very interesting player. But yeah, I mean, Vientos, for those reasons, the lack of options, the lack of defensive versatility, and then overall, this is now his fourth cup of coffee or stint in a major league season. And we've seen this iteration of Mark Vientos 3 times and last year's iteration only once. So it's difficult, to kind of pinpoint how the Mets value him. It's difficult to pinpoint how other teams value him because the flaws are real, but the upside is also still very much there and very much tantalizing.
I feel like it's high risk, to trade him away. Not necessarily high risk. You get something back in return for him, of course, but you trade him away and he figures it out and played again. Here's the thing, and something why I even texted you about this, specifically about Vientos. If you look at his advanced stats, his strikeout rate is down to 24%, which is the lowest of his career. And you look at everything else, and you're like, why the hell isn't this translating? Like, he's walking more. He's his eyesight clearly, his discipline, whatever the hell it is, has improved. But yet his OPS is almost 200 points lower than it was at some points last year. We have definitely a concerning trend. 2 games in a row now with 2 hits. He's gotten a hit in 12 of his last 13 games, I believe. So listen, I think things are looking up. You can't deal him now. You wait, see what you have the rest of the year. It doesn't make any sense for me. For at least, for now, for the Mets to trade him away. But, one of the best parts of this Mets team, and it's something we also discussed earlier on in the year, is their rotation. David Peterson has kind of been this revelation. I don't think anyone expected him to be this good. You got Clay Holmes, who, of course, a lot of people like myself had some doubts about watching him on the Yankees, his lack of control. Of course, from him going from being a reliever, a closer with the Yankees to becoming a starter, he's got a 3.3 ERA. Give me what have you seen from this rotation this year, and how much of a factor do you think it has been in the Mets' record right now, and how good they played as of late?
Yeah, I think overall what I've seen from the rotation, outside of David Peterson, in all honesty, not great, right? I think in the beginning of the year, when Koenig was still healthy and we had McGill pitching, the pitching came out off the gates very hot, top to bottom. The bullpen was good too.
Yeah.
When they hit their kind of lull in June, when the season innings start to pile up and workloads start to, weigh on you a little bit more, it starts to seem that kind of things were folding a little bit. And recently, team has come off 2 straight losses, but they won previous 7 before that. So, when you kind of look at it since coming off the All-Star break, right when we got Senga back, Sean Manaea back, things have once again looked better. A disturbing statistic about this rotation is I think going back their last at this point like 45 games, they've only had a starting pitcher record an out in the sixth inning like 6 times, I think is the stat, or 5 or 6 times. And every single instance of that is David Peterson. So outside of Peterson, the Mets have been struggling to get length out of their starting pitchers, which is obviously a concerning development. Now, the caveat with that is Senga and Manaea just coming off of injury, their workload's been managed. Senga, aside from throwing 2 mistake pitches to Matt Chapman, looked really strong on Sunday Night Baseball. That ghost forkball really might be one of the best or top 5 secondary pitches in all of baseball. It is absolutely lethal. Sean Manaea has not yet made it past 5 innings of work, but he has looked great in the 4 appearances he has made this year. And let's not forget, Sean Manaea down the stretch last year looked like an absolute ace, top 10 pitcher in baseball, went on to receive Cy Young votes and pitched some inspirational games in the playoffs, including one I was at, Game 3 of the NLDS against the Phillies, when he threw 7 innings of 1-run ball. So looking forward for this Mets team, right, I think I feel personally really good about a combination of a rotation anchored by Senga, Peterson, and Manaea. I think that those top 3, when they're pitching at the top of their game, that is a rotation that can get you deep into October. Clay Holmes.
That's all you need in a series, especially in a 5-game series. It's all you need. And then get in a 7-game series, you get those 3 guys on the in the 4th game, you go with an opener, and then 5, 6, 7, you got those 3 guys yet again. So I feel like that's all you realistically, it's all you really need in a big series. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned the injuries to Koenig. I was actually at that game when what was the actual injury that he suffered?
It was he ruptured his Achilles.
Yeah. So it did not look good at the time. That was obviously a huge loss for the Mets. But other than that injury and Clay Holmes kind of, I wouldn't say falling off the face of the planet. I think the 3 guys that the Mets have right now are really solid going forward. I actually, let's pop up some of these comments here. If you want to leave a comment, just drop it below. The Baseball Purist says, prediction: the Mets will trade for Stephen Kwan, Andy Alcantara, and Ryan Helsley. He said Hesley, but Helsley. All 3 will be Mets. This guy sounds like a Yankees fan. This guy sounds like the equivalent of a Yankees fan in a Mets fan. That's pretty insane. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think starting backwards, Helsley is a guy, right, like we were discussing earlier. He's close to the caliber, possibly of the caliber of a guy like Diaz. You throw him in the 8th inning. When Diaz needs an off night, you throw him in the 9th inning. Right, that's a guy you feel comfortable about high leverage spots. Would be all aboard the Helsley train. He is a free agent at the end of the year, so it would not be. This would be a pure rental deal. Obviously, the possibility exists that they re-sign him the offseason. And then in terms of the other 2 guys, Kwan, I think it doesn't make a ton of sense from the Mets just roster construction point of view. He hasn't played center field much, if at all, in his career. I don't think the Mets are super inclined to move Nimmo back there. He's kind of grading out as an average fielder in left. He's 32. They want to keep him healthy. He had that plantar fasciitis bothering him all of the end of last year. So I think Kwan, as much as he's a solid player, great glove, doesn't strike out a lot, high average hitter, I think he is a much more reasonable fit for a team like the Phillies or the Blue Jays. And then Sandier, going back to the rotation point, right? I think that it's been expressed if the Mets are going to add a starting pitcher, they're going to add someone who they think is an ace caliber pitcher, who they think they're comfortable giving the ball to in a World Series game. And I'd say Sandier is right. There's arguments to be made that he's just a few years off of a Cy Young season, and he's coming off Tommy John, and he's pitching for a team that plays in front of 7,000 fans a night. And there might not be a ton of motivation, but it's tough for me to look at a guy with a mid-6 ERA and a mid-4 FIP and kind of that this is the Sandy Alcantara that won a Cy Young 2 years ago. So if the price is right, I'm interested. If the Mets trade for him, he's got a lot of control left, and they clearly think that they could, help improve him. But at the same time, I'd be much more inclined for a guy like Dylan Cease, who's a rental, likely be cheaper. Or even, from the Marlins too, Edward Cabrera it might even be a more intriguing name to me than Sandier. But we'll see. Not going to rule it out. I don't know anything, but just from what it seems like the Marlins price point is and how he's performed this year, I'm not all that jazzed up by the idea of Sandy.
Here's a fun one. This is going to be good. Which team is in better shape currently? The Yankees or the Mets? CBW, do you live under a rock? I think that question might have the easiest answer ever. It's clearly the Mets. The Yankees are an absolute disaster. Anthony Volpe does not deserve to he does not deserve to continue to get called Anthony. We call him now Andrew. Andrew Volpe is terrible, even though he hit an absolute bomb last night. I'll let you expand on this. I'm clearly biased. I'm really angry with where the Yankees are right now, but I guess I'm biased, per se. So take it away.
Yeah, I think to answer this question first, I would say the Mets, just not even from a biased point of view, I think the Mets are set up actually both better this season and also long term. The way the farm systems look this year, obviously things are subject to change. If the Mets make a couple big trades and they unload on the farm, perhaps it's a different conversation. But I think the Mets are the team that's in better shape here. And in terms of the Yankees, from my vantage point, it's a very interestingly constructed team. They've got a lot of players at redundant positions. They can't figure out a way to get all of their best bats in the lineup on the same day because they all play the same positions. Obviously, Judge going out is something you can't control, and completely depending on, just Judge being out of the lineup obviously really lowers the floor of the team. But when you talk about him coming back and possibly having a DH for a certain period of time, then that basically takes Stanton. And while he's not going to run in 140 OPS plus, he might, but you're taking at a bare minimum an above average bat that still has some very scary power in it out of the lineup, just because Stanton is not physically going to be able to play the field. I really have my doubts about that. The Mets can barely get 5 innings a month from Starling Marte out there. I don't think the Yankees can get much more from Stanton. They've made some savvy moves. Like I think adding Ahmed Rosario and Austin Slater for cheap are smart moves that help address an immediate need for better offense against left-handed pitching. Obviously, this stuff sometimes doesn't work out. The Mets traded for Darren Ruff in 2022. They traded like 4 guys for him because he was good against lefties and he just stunk. But at least Rosario has some versatility. He can play around the diamond, and Slater has a extensive history as being like one of the best pinch hitters, if not the best pinch hitter in like modern baseball history. And then McMahon too. I think McMahon has his flaws. He's not an above average bat. His numbers are significantly lower outside of Coors than they were at Coors, especially this year. And even though the Yankees have the short porch, according to Baseball Savant, he actually would have had the least amount of home runs in Yankee Stadium compared to any other stadium. But the defense is undeniable. He's a very above average glove at a bare minimum. And once again, we're talking about upgrades. The upgrade from Peraza to McMahon is pretty huge. So yeah. I think that the Yankees have kind of operated well, right? There's a lot of uncertainty with this team. Is Judge going to be back to full health? Stuff like that. I don't think it's worth pushing all the chips in for someone like Eugenio Suarez, who probably would have cost a significant prospect package for him when you could acquire Suarez and Judge could be out. So I mean we'll see what else they do. They definitely need bullpen. The entire bullpen. Luke Weaver's regressed. I mean, he wasn't going to run a sub-1 ERA his whole Yankee tenure. The rotation is still at the top, very good, but obviously a lot of question marks beyond Rodon and Fried. Luis Gil is coming back, I believe, on Sunday. Yep. So I'll be interested to see how he looks. He's had some command issues in the minors, but command issues have kind of been something with him his whole career. He had command issues last year, but just didn't give up any hits. So we'll see.
I mean, they literally, the catcher would just hold up the mitt, and the mitt just like throw it. As long as it's a strike, it's impossible to hit. So I'm excited for Luis Gil to return. Definitely. I mean, that's a very easy answer to give. Again, it's the Mets and the Yankees. I don't think that these marginal improvements are going to help at the end of the day. They either needed to go all in or they're not going to go all in. And I think it might be a smarter idea to do it next year. You got Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge, the tail end of their careers here. And I think Garrett Cole can give you three or four more solid seasons after seeing, what type of pitcher Verlander was, Scherzer was. in their mid to late 30s, and that's where, of course, Gerrit Cole is approaching now. But all right, Gabe, dude, this is a pleasure. I love having you on as always. I discuss this with you, maybe have you on every other week. I know you got Wednesdays. Your Wednesdays are pretty wide open, so I think this might be an ongoing thing here until the end of the baseball season. Of course, this trade deadline now in about 28 hours. So stay locked to Gabe's Twitter at HersGabe for any analysis for who the Mets trade for, and of course mine for whatever underwhelming player the Yankees will probably go out and get. Maybe they're done, maybe they're not. I guess we'll find out. But Gabe, dude, pleasure as always. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Bryce. Talk to you soon.
All right, peace.